on the archives. Um, so it's great to be able to be together. Last night, so wonderful, and Rabbi Zola is nothing if not a magician, not alone of menschlichkeit, but of making history come to life. I was thinking, I kept singing the Marvin Gaye song that I looked up to make sure I got the third chorus, the third verse. Has anyone here seen my old friend Martin? Can you tell me where he's gone? He freed a lot of people, but it seems the good they die young. Just looked around and he was gone. Um, he was speaking what everybody was feeling in the moment in 1968. And it's so strange, if not a little bit Meshuggah, that a half century later, and we sort of feel like we're back in the same place. We're not, of course, but those same feelings have so resurfaced these past couple of years, and especially this past year, from Emmett Till, Medgar Evers, to George Floyd. So that it to me, uh, it's it's that we've made strides toward freedom in the beloved community that the Reverend Dr. King helped us or wanted us to create, and yet we're not there yet. Still, Rabbi Zoll is here to tell us what we might know a bit about, but don't fully understand, that the civil rights movement of the 60s was very much a Jewish movement aligned with Jewish values and bespeaks the reasons that we have to be on the front lines and have really our hearts filled with the hope for sacred civil rights for all. Um, we know that if you were here last night, we're in for a treat because Rabbi Zola, professor of Reform Jewish History at HUC in Cincinnati, executive director of the American Jewish Archives, one of the great schnorrers of our generation, in the same line as his teacher, Dr. Jacob Rader Marcus. Rabbi Zola is just a gift as a teacher, and we are so blessed to have him here with us today. If you're not muted, by the way, Jane is about to mute everyone except for Rabbi Zola.
Well, thank you so very much, Rabbi. I'm so grateful to you. I want to be repetitive of what I said for everybody who's now joined us last night. It is a real treat to be invited. My teacher, Dr. Hoffman, is on this call, and he can confirm that it's always flattering. It really is, to be invited to come to a congregation where there's a learned teacher there already, and to be asked to teach. It's always a big honor. But it's a real special honor to be at Larchmont Temple because of the long standing friendship that Rabbi Serkman and I have. Um, he and I met. I may have been ordained a year or two, and I was at the time serving as the dean of admissions for the Hebrew Union College. So my job was to go looking around for prospective rabbis and cantors. And during the summer, I visited summer camps. And that's where I met Rabbi Serkman. He was working that summer at our Reform Movements camp in Georgia. And when I walked into the director's office, the first thing he said to me is, you have to meet this guy, Jeff Serkman. He's an unbelievable talent. So I went to talk to him. I can't take any credit for actually getting him to into HUC. I guess I can only take credit for not being an obstacle, but uh, everything that was evident then has been evident over these past many decades. And he and I have been wonderful friends all these years. And the truth is, we also really get to see each other at least once a year, because I hope you all know that Rabbi Serkman, among many other things that he does for the Hebrew Union College in New York, he runs what might be called a 2-week program for graduating cantors and rabbis, sort of a seminar that takes place right at the end of their last year to kind of bridge between finishing all their schoolwork and getting ready to actually go out. And during those 2 weeks, I've always go to New York and teach a little bit about the American Jewish Archives and how the archives can be of help to our graduates. And so we work on that together, and we get to see each other at least once a year. So he's such a special person. And as I said last night, I don't mean to be self-deprecatory, but it's easier for me to come to a place and teach about something I've written on, or I study, or for God's sakes, I actually sit on the world's largest collection of material having to do with the topic that I myself study. The real challenge is to prepare something every week, to be fresh every week, to have something new to say, to continue to grow. And we should never, never lose sight of the value of our rabbis and how important they are. So this really comes from my heart. So in the time that I have, I want to just quickly begin. By the way, I also want to say, because I'm so honored that Dr. Hoffman is here. Dr. Hoffman, as I told him, he knows this, that he was actually the very first HUC professor that I ever had. I told him this because I was trying to decide whether I should study in New York or study in Cincinnati. And so I went to New York to visit in New York, and I got to sit in on different classes. And the first class was a liturgy class that Dr. Hoffman was teaching. This would be in the early 1970s. And his humanity and his kindness was evident even then. So today, this afternoon, what I want to quickly do is try to give you first, in the first little part of this, a little bit of the ideology and the philosophy behind why it is that Jews really care about civil rights as they do. How is it that Jews have become so involved in various civil rights initiatives over the course of American Jewish history? And then the last half maybe get to some examples of that. And I want to say what I said to the rabbi. I really would urge you, don't wait till the end of 45 minutes to ask a question, because I have a tendency, I guess, all of us who teach at the university, we tend to talk in hour and 15-minute blocks. So, I just sort of go on auto, and I don't want you to wait. If you wait, you may not get to ask your question. So if you have an important question, it doesn't bother me in the least. I'm not reading off of a script or anything of that sort. So just send your message either on a chat or let me know, wave at me, and I'll be happy to answer your question.
Or I'll be on the lookout, Rabbi Zola, as well. So if they put it in the chat, I can feed it to you as well.
Super. So I'm going to share my screen in just a minute, but before I think you do know that I'll be able to see, by the way, all of you, because I have two screens here. But those of you who don't, there'll be a vertical line sort of on the, I guess, right side of your screen, and you can slide the document to one direction or the other if you want to see more of the document, you want to see more people. So, I want to begin by saying that most American Jewish historians, most of them, the vast majority, have subscribed over the 20th century to the idea that America and American history, the American Jewish experience, is qualitatively different than any other diaspora experience in the history of the diaspora. And I just want to distinguish, if I could, very quickly between what is often called American exceptionalism. That's the idea that America as a nation is exceptional. And that's an idea that a political scientist by the name of Seymour Lipset sort of advanced about 50 years ago, and has some acceptance among many and some challenges among others. What I'm talking about is something a little different. It's the idea that Jews have subscribed to for good reason, that life for the Jew in America has been shaped differently and has a different quality than any other place in the diaspora. And with that having been said, I want to expel that out to you and help to explain it to you quickly. And with that, I'm going to now share my screen. And in a second, when I do so, hopefully now you should all be seeing a beautiful picture of the Cincinnati campus. Is that, if you shake your head, can you? Okay, that's the historic Cincinnati campus. And so let me begin by explaining how that came to be. What is it that generally speaking makes the American Jewish experience unique in all of diaspora history? This is, I'm speaking in generalizations, but many historians believe this. Um, uh, one could answer that with four possibilities. I'm not saying this is exhaustive, but it covers a good ground. First, that you have to remember that unique, really, in all of diaspora, that Jews were actually present on this territory even before the nation came into existence. So there was no nation of America, of the United States of America, that existed for many years, and then Jews came and joined. They were here as part of the colonial experience, and then the nation comes into existence. So Jews were actually here to help create America, and that's unique. There isn't another situation like that in the diaspora. Second is, and this is, I guess, related, you could kind of combine one and two. Second is that Jews actually participated in the fight for America. They did so by being soldiers. They did so by being partisans. They did so in economic ways. Now, I want to be quickly add that we also had a little share of our own Tories, right? We had those who sided with the British, that's true. But the vast majority of the Jews, this has been documented, sided with the revolution. And so we participated. That's a fact of history. And very unusual. You can't find another example of that in diaspora. Then, of course, is the adoption of the Constitution. I don't have to remind you all of your civics classes that you took in junior high school and high school, that when America first came into being after the end of the Revolutionary War, there was a little bit of a different country that existed. It was also called the United States of America, but we didn't have the Constitution. It took about 4 or 5 years later to convene a convention that would actually bring about the Constitution. And in that Constitution, there are statements about, of course, that this is going to be a country that implants within all people God-given rights, and that all are equal. This is the language, right, that is in our founding documents. Now, we all know that there are a lot of people. I'm looking at 50% of the people here were, and maybe more, were not represented or didn't have those rights back when the Constitution was adopted. So people of color, women, and you could go on and on, that despite that rhetoric, that didn't happen. And one question we can't get into today, we don't have enough time, but it's an interesting question, is did the founders, did the framers of the Constitution actually have Jews in mind when they were speaking these ideas? Obviously, they didn't have people of color in mind. Obviously, they didn't have women in mind, right? But the question is, Jews are not mentioned. So it leaves it sort of up for grabs. Let's put it this way, do white-skinned color Jews, male, who are landowners, do they have the same rights as everyone else in that when that Constitution was adopted? Jews took the position and have always taken the position, have never swayed from this, that this is what the Constitution meant. The Constitution meant that we were included. We took that silence, the silence of the Constitution, to mean, of course, we were included. But there have been, and there continue to be, to this day, people who don't agree with that. And that's something I want you to keep in the back of my mind. And the last thing that I have to mention, and I think we have seen this so clearly in the last 4 years, and that is never forget that the independent judiciary that is created by the Constitution is part and parcel with this. Because, for example, I could show you a whole variety of constitutions that exist in other parts of the world. Take, for example, the constitution I've happened to look at of the old Soviet Union. Uh, you read it, it sounds pretty good. It sounds quite a bit like our own constitution. The only problem is you can't fight City Hall, right? You don't have an independent judiciary because the judiciary is in the pocket with the government. So the fact that the federal judiciary is supposedly appointed by life for life, that means no one can touch them, not even those who've appointed them. And that means no matter what they did to get into office, theoretically, they could free themselves of that obligation because they can't be touched. I mean, obviously, it could be touched for moral turpitude or something, but in terms of they have the right to make the decisions they want to make. And haven't we seen that in action in the last 4 years? We've seen that actually in action. Despite appointments and so forth, judiciary so far, in my opinion, you can challenge me, but the judiciary is one of the guardrails that seems to have held up more or less these past many years. Now, having said all of that, this means
No, I'm
that,
going to go in the bedroom, honey. It's okay.
this means that Jews have taken the conviction, unswerving, unwavering, unflagging conviction that we are part of the American experience, both as Americans and as Jews, that we have been given this as our birthright because of the conditions I just mentioned. And that means Jews, and this is the sort of brings me to my main point. Jews, therefore, in this country have, on the basis of that conviction, have had 3 important ideas that I wish to teach you right now. First, Jews have taken the position from the time of the Constitution to the present, because of everything I just said, that Jewish citizens and Judaism itself, the religion, their religious beliefs, their ethnos, possesses equal footing under the law, that the U.S. government does not advantage another religion over Judaism or Judaism over any other religion. And if it does, Jews have fought against that and have spoken out against that. And that has motivated them to civil action, to social action and social justice causes. Meaning, we're not going to sit here and let people say, well, you're Jews, so that means you're really not part of the American fabric. We reject that and have rejected that from the minute the Constitution was adopted. Second, and this is very interesting, Jews as citizens of the United States have taken the position that we have the right as American citizens and as Jews, both at the same time, that we can argue for protection under the laws of the United States when we are in another country, that we should be treated with the respect that we are entitled to in America, wherever we may be doing business or visiting or what have you, that we should not be subjected to the laws that may be discriminatory in other parts of this world. And even more than that we have the right as an American citizen to petition our country because this is we are the people. That means Jews are a portion of the people. And therefore we have a right to argue our cause, issues that are important to us, to the government, and ask the government to abet us in those issues. So, for example, the state of Israel is a primary example. We happen to have a keen interest in the welfare of the state of Israel, and therefore we have a right to make the case that that the American people would benefit as a whole from supporting Israel. And just like the farmers in Iowa have the right to organize and to petition and to lobby for issues that are important to them, we have that right. And no one should challenge us and say, well, you're just Jews and you're loyal to certain things that are important to you as Jews. That's not the American way. So that's number 2. And 3, this is what brings us to really the key of our topic here. The United States Constitution, as we all know, posits a very delicate balance between majority rule and minority rights. There are certain inalienable rights that cannot be taken away. We hear a lot about that today, right? You have the right to free speech. You have the right to assemble. We have certain rights, and they're in the Constitution. And unless the Constitution itself is amended, those rights cannot be voted out, even by a majority of people. And therefore, certain constitutional rights need protection. And this, over the years that Jews have been in America, has become more and more important to Jews, because it dawns on us that if we're really concerned about protecting our rights as a minority, we must also be concerned about protecting other people's rights as a minority. Because if we're not concerned with minority rights in general, we can't expect people to be concerned with our rights as a minority. And that has been a growing and growing concern over the course of the American Jewish experience. By the way, I have to always stop here and tell you a story, even though I'm taking time. It's an important story, because I always used to tell that story just as I teach it, just as I did, except once I was teaching to a confirmation class, and a girl in the confirmation class, when I taught just what I taught you, she put her hand up and she said to me, I have a question. She said, Rabbi, wouldn't you think that the Torah has something to do with our interest in human rights and in civil rights? Wouldn't you say that? And so I've never really forgotten being skewered by a 16-year-old. And so I think it's only appropriate to point out that, yes, it's true, she's right. We can't really pull apart the strands. It's not merely that we do this because of our own political self-interest, though that may be what motivates some people. It's also, we have an ethical heritage, and that comes into play with certain people too. I can't spell out the balance, or how much is of one piece and another, but I think my confirmation class student taught me that it's true. We can't forget to mention that. Now, having said that, I want to give you some examples, and we go back to point number 1. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. Jewish citizens. This is the first point that I made in terms of what all this has led to, that Judaism itself, the Jewish experience, and the Jewish citizenry have equal footing with any other part of the population, what's been called by the great poet the teeming nation of nations, and that the government should not, nor should the people, advantage one religion over another. Let me give you an example to show you how long we've been fighting this battle. I'm going to take you now to a document that I'm very proud of. I found this document, and I've only recently, just about 3 years, the first time I was able to publish it. I was working on my PhD dissertation, and I was in Charleston. And by the way, this was long before digitized newspapers. So I was sitting in Charleston reading page after page after page, looking for, because I wrote my dissertation on the Jews of Charleston in the early 19th century. And so I'm reading, looking for Jewish names, and I come across this newspaper article, which looks to you very big, but in the newspaper itself, on the page, it's just a little square, and I see at the bottom, G.P. Cohen. And I thought, wow, that must be a Jew. I want to read, what does it say about G.P. Cohen? It says Jewish name is Zola. So I thought, well, I'll read what it says. And I looked at this document and I almost plotzed. I said, I cannot believe what a treasure this is. And I made a beautiful copy of it. And I brought it back to the American Jewish Archives. And a few years ago, I was able to publish it in a collection of documents. Now, here's where we get to a class participation. I'd love for someone to volunteer to open up his or her mic and read this document. It's so delicious of a document, and it illustrates my point so beautifully that I really want to go through this one document before we get to the civil rights in the 60s. I see Lynn and Mike are volunteering, so open your mic and go ahead and start reading.
To the public, having had a dispute with Dr. Edward Chisholm and feeling myself insulted by an illiberal expression made by him, I applied to a gentleman of respectability and honorable feeling to call on Dr. Edward Chisholm and to demand an apology. If this was not promptly given, then to demand the only redress that honor has long established as the practice in these cases.
Let's stop here, sir. Can you tell the class what is going on here up to this point?
He's about to challenge him to a duel.
Exactly. So here in 1827, you see that this man, Mr. Cohen, has been insulted by a Dr. Edward Chisholm. And he says, I'm going to send someone to demand an apology. And if that apology is not forthcoming, then I deserve what any gentleman deserves. After all, we're in the South. It's a duel. There's a whole, the whole study about duels and Jews is an interesting topic. I'll have to come back and teach about that later. But at any rate, please, you're doing beautifully, sir. Please keep going.
Dr. Chisholm, through his friend, answered that he would give me no satisfaction and that I was not on a footing with him because I was a Jew, nor did he conceive any Jew to be on a footing with him.
Okay, let me interrupt. Well, there you have it. So if anybody was sitting in class today saying, I don't know if Zola's right. I mean, after all, you know, who challenged the fact that you could be a Jew and an American at the same time? Well, here's a document that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that a guy by the name of Chisholm from Charleston, South Carolina, felt that a Jew was not his equal. Not only was this man, Mr. Cohen, not his equal, but all Jews were not his equal. Okay, keep going.
As such a subterfuge as this marks the individual, not only with illiberality and ignorance, but with cowardice, it is therefore becomes my painful duty to intrude these remarks on the public in order to expose him to the community in which I live, the place of my nativity.
The place of my nativity. I was born here, damn it. And what choice does this man have? He what can he do? He doesn't have social media. He doesn't have Facebook. He has no other alternative but to put it in the newspaper. He buys an ad and he sticks it in the newspaper because this man won't give him what he's due. Now, sir, may I call you Mike? Because I see.
Certainly can.
Okay, thank you. Sir, I want you to know you're reading beautifully, and this next paragraph is the core paragraph, and it emphasizes the exact point I was making. So read it with flavor and with fervor.
The Constitution of the United States and of my native state give me and every citizen of every religious denomination equal rights and equal privileges. Religious distinctions are not known in this country. Members of the same community are valued only according to their conduct in life, and none but a bigot and a coward like Edward Chisholm would attempt to insult the whole nation by refusing that satisfaction which every gentleman is ready to give and to receive. Signed, G.P. Cohen, Charleston, South Carolina, July 25th, 1827.
All right. Now, if anyone knows anything about American Jewish history, there might have been in 1827, maybe 3,000 Jews in all of the United States of America at this time. Now, it's true Charleston had the largest one of the largest Jewish communities at that time. Of course, I always relish in telling New Yorkers that there was one period in American Jewish history when Charleston was the largest Jewish community in all of America for about 15 years. So I do like to topple the Big Apple just for a short period of time, that when it didn't have the most Jews in America. But isn't this a delicious document? I mean, listen to what he is saying. He has the courage as a little minority to insist that what he says in the second paragraph is what he wants to assert. And though Dr. Chisholm does not agree with him, as many Americans didn't agree with him, here you have a very early expression of the fight for civil rights for our own people, our predecessors battling, insisting that no matter what this man says, the Constitution guarantees every citizen of every religious tradition, not just mine, this is what we brought to America. This is what we've contributed, that as a little minority, we deserve equal standing under the law. And only a bigot and a coward, he says in the paper, like Chisholm, who's doesn't even know what Americanism means, would suggest something else. I mean, this is a rich document. The fact is that he says religious distinctions are not known in this country. Well, I'm going to have a hard time swallowing that. I think he knew that there were religious distinctions and that not everybody was treated equal. The document itself suggests that. However, this is a great and early example. I could bring you another example. I'm only going to just touch on this because we'll run out of time, but just to wet your whistle, here's another example from 1840s. This picture is of Jacob Ezekiel. Jacob Ezekiel became famous because his son was the famous artist Moses Ezekiel. Some of you may have read that they just schlepped away Moses Ezekiel's statue from the front of the University. No, was it University of Virginia, or was it the Virginia Military College? I can't remember which one, but Moses Ezekiel was a famous artist, also fought in the Confederacy, and that's why his work is now being challenged. Jacob Ezekiel was the first secretary of the Board of Governors of the Hebrew Union College. He later moved to Cincinnati, but at the time you're seeing this picture, he was living in Richmond. He was born in Philadelphia, moved to Richmond, Virginia, and very briefly, I'm going to show you a letter right now. This is a letter that is the original, is at the American Jewish Archives. And this letter is a letter from Jacob Ezekiel to the President of the United States, John Tyler. As you can see here, you can make it out. It says, to His Excellency John Tyler. And why is this letter important? What would I have if I was going to teach it to you today? Is because William Henry Harrison died after 1 month of an office, and the vice president, John Tyler, becomes the president. The first thing that John Tyler does is he asks Americans to go into their houses of worship and pray for the fallen president who died after 1 month in office, the great general. So what's wrong with that? The wrong is that the proclamation that John Tyler issues begins with these words: given that we are a Christian people. That's how he begins the proclamation. Well, Jacob Ezekiel knows him because John Tyler was his congressman. He comes from Richmond. And that's why he begins, to His Excellency John Tyler, President of the United States, esteemed and respected friend. And I wish I could unpack this document for you. I'll never get to other things, but he basically, I mean, I'll just pull up, this is 1841. I'm just going to pull up one paragraph from this letter. Look what he says. I, as well as others, were somewhat surprised to find in the columns of our journals, as in an age in which we live, that the chief magistrate of this union should, by an official recommendation to the people of the United States, address, quote, a Christian people as being overtaken by a great public calamity, no doubt forgetting that during the revolution of this country, blood of all denominations was shed for its freedom. In those days, there was no distinction. It was not asked whether it was Christian, Jewish, or pagan blood that flowed freely for the liberty we all now possess. So here's another example of that. Now, I'm going to have to skip over because actually John Tyler answers him, and one day I'll come back and teach you all of this. I can't do that right now, but and I wish I could show you this particular. I'm moving ahead because I know we have a limit on the time. You know, Dr. Hoffman will tell you that my teacher, Dr. Marcus, always used to say to the rabbinic students, please remember that the mind can absorb only as much as the tushy can endure. So I want to keep to my time frame as best I can.
Rabbi Zola, you're under the Abba Hillel Silva rule. So if you go to an hour, it's not a big deal. So don't worry about it, please.
All right. So now the second point that I made is that the first point was that Jews and Judaism have equal footing. The second point you remember is that Jews have always taken the position that we are entitled to the same rights abroad as we have here, and that we have the right to fight for Jews in other parts of the world and ask the American nation to do that for us, because we're a republic and we are the people. We're not the entirety of the people, but we're a portion of the people. So I'm going to just introduce you to one example of this because of the time, but just to prove, you can't just say something as a historian, you have to at least illustrate it with a document. You have to prove that it happened. So you're looking at a picture of one of the great Jewish leaders of the late 19th, early 20th century, financier, very wealthy, prominent, accomplished immigrant who came here in the 1840s, became a very successful banker and financier, Jacob Schiff. I often teach that in 1909, the premier of the Russian Empire met Schiff and later spoke about him. Here this Russian man, who hangs around only with the aristocracy and the czardom of Russia. He can't imagine a Jew like Jacob Schiff. Look how he writes about him at the beginning. He says, I never before met a man like Schiff. I've never met a Jew like Schiff. Proud, dignified, conscious of his power. He declared to me solemnly that so long as the Tsar's government would continue in its anti-Jewish policy, he would exert every effort to make it impossible for Russia to get a kopeck from the United States. I mean, you can only imagine that someone who people who made a living out of oppressing Jews and being cruel to Jews, the Russians, they wouldn't know what to make of an American Jew like this. Well, just to give you an illustration of what of the second point that I made, and that is that the American nation had a long-standing treaty with the Russians, and many people, and this was led by the American Jewish community, which had now grown. We're talking, of course, about 1911, so it had grown to be a much larger community. We had millions of Eastern Europeans here, and this 1832 treaty between Russia and the United States for trade the suggestion was made that if the Russians continue to act in a way which would attack American Jews who want to go to work in Russia, who want to go and do things in Russia, and treat these American Jews as if they are not full-fledged American citizens in Russia, that this whole treaty should be abrogated. And in the end, they succeed in doing this. It takes many years, and this was one of the first big successful initiatives of the American Jewish Committee, which was established in 1906. When they get it to the House hearing on the Committee of Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives, a whole group of Jews who support this are invited to make statements and make their case. And some of these names you may recognize, but there in the middle is Jacob Schiff, one of our graduates, Rabbi Silverman of Emmanuel congregation spoke, and so forth. Many other prominent Jewish citizens, among others. And I'm going to read to you just a bit of what Jacob Schiff says in front of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs in advocating for the abrogation of this treaty because of the way Jews are treated by the Russian Empire. Now, gentlemen, he says, this is a chestnut that has come down through the centuries. This question has always been the same, in the same position at the end of every administration. Every administration has claimed it has done the best that was practicable, but it has not been the case. The best that was practicable was never done. And whatever has been done has not been done at the time it should have been done. The best that is practicable is to honor and vindicate the dignity of the American people as against Russia and all that Russia stands for. Now, gentlemen, just think of this. If any of you who happen to confess the Jewish faith, any American who accidentally was born of Jewish parentage, wants to go to the Far East today and wants to take the shortest route, he takes the Trans-Siberian Railway. And when he comes to the Russian border, he's told no thoroughfare. Just think of it, gentlemen. Just think of what it means to be an American. In 1914 and 1915, our Panama Canal will be completed. The great contribution which the American people are making to civilization and to the civilized world. That will then be open to the commerce of the world. Let us suppose that a Russian steamer would come through the gates of the canal and would be told by the Americans, you cannot pass through. What a howl there would be on the part of the civilized world. You see my simile. Are you going to stand for this? Gentlemen, I have finished, and I have only this to beg of you in conclusion. I have little fear that a committee composed, as this committee is composed, of high-minded men, of what this report of this committee will be, but if you wish to vindicate the dignity of Congress, the dignity of the American people, then make your report unanimous. And this would eventually pass Congress, and the treaty was in fact abrogated. So now I'm going to bring us finally to the third point, which is the point that leads us into the activities ultimately of the 1960s and the civil rights movement. And that is the other issue that begins to dawn on us, that Jews must also be concerned about minority rights in general, the rights of minorities, not just our own. It's not good enough just to be like Mr. Cohen and worry about that, or like Mr. Schiff. We have to also be worried about other minorities. And to begin this, I want to take us back to 1940 and a book that was published in 1940. The book is entitled Native Son by a great African-American author, Richard Wright, and there's his picture. Has anybody had to read Native Son? Yes. Would anybody who just put their hand up be able to quickly summarize the story for those who haven't read it? Or I don't want to put anybody on the spot. It's been so long you can't recall. Huh? Well, in essence, it is a novel, but it's based on the challenging, difficult, horrible conditions that so many Blacks endure in America, that this protagonist in the book, a man by the name of Bigger Thomas, ends up having sort of a corrupted life because opportunities are not presented to him, and so forth and so on. And at some point in the novel, he ends up he's going to rob a house, and the owner of the house, a woman, surprises him, barges in, or surprises him, and she screams. And in order to silence the woman, Bigger Thomas puts a pillow over her mouth and tries to keep her from making the noise that she's making. And he ends up inadvertently, unintentionally, he kills her. And so he goes to jail, and the African-American novelist creates the character of a Jewish lawyer who defends Bigger Thomas. And in the book, the writer, Richard Wright, has the Jewish lawyer say, you know, for sure this man is going to be convicted of murder, because if there's anybody that the jury will hate more than a Black man, it's a Jewish lawyer. This, again, coming from the novelist who himself is a Black man. And in the book, the Jewish lawyer is a rather heroic figure who does his very best to try to argue for the rights of Bigger Thomas. The book ends, Bigger Thomas is convicted and he's waiting his execution. Now, none other than Stephen Wise, the great famous rabbi, founder of the Jewish Institute of Religion, preaches on this book in the year 1940. The reason he preaches on this book is because it's a bestseller. It's on the top of the New York Times bestseller list. And therefore, it gives him an opportunity, Stephen Wise, in the year 1940, in New York City at Carnegie Hall, which is where services were held, to speak about the obligation of Jews to Blacks in America. This is, by the way, 14 years before Brown versus Board of Education. Now, this recording that I'm about to play is extremely rare. The American Jewish Archives has 174 of these recordings that were made from the year 1934 to 1942 of Stephen Wise. They exist nowhere else in the world but at the American Jewish Archives. They've all now been digitized. We've raised the money. They've been digitized and they're available. And you are now going to be propelled back 70 years and hear Stephen Wise in his own voice. Someday I'll tell you, maybe tomorrow, I'll tell you how we actually acquired these recordings. You're going to now hear Stephen Wise speaking on this topic. And this is a remarkable opportunity. Let me know if you can't hear it. In a minute, it should play.
To me, as I read Native Son, the word and the mind and the understanding and compassionate soul of the Jewish lawyer became to me at one and the same time symbol, rebuke, prophecy, challenge, symbol of what the Jew should be and do in relation to other races that are oppressed and ground into the dust. And I remembered the very sage and shrewd observation personally made to me a generation ago by Israel Zengin and repeated in one of his last volumes. If only the Jews could forget their own fate, however bitter, and remember and try to better the fate of another, some alien race, such as the Negro race. After all, we Jews, as no other people, we know the heart of the oppressed. And I can't help saying to you, if there be any Jews in this congregation today who hail from the South, they are likely profoundly to disagree with me. But I must speak the truth as I see it. The indifference of the Jew, child of 35 centuries of civilization, his own. The indifference of the Jew throughout the country, save for rarest exceptions, to the fate of the Negro race is deeply dishonoring to the Jew. I feel a double obligation to every oppressed race and to every wronged man on earth. For I am an American and I am a Jew. All I can say to you as I close is this. The time is come, in part as a result of the writing of this extraordinary indictment of the white race in its study of abnormal criminality. The time is come for Americans to bethink themselves, to think through and over again the whole problem of relations. And I suppose I can't help feeling, what if others fail? What if Christians fail? What if Catholic and Protestant churches fail? Must we fail because they do? Must our Judaism remain a mockery and a pretense? Even if it be true that Christianity, Christendom has suffered oceanic and even infinite wrong to be laid upon the body and the soul of the Negro race.
This is really a rich document because, I mean, there's so much to talk about. We could spend 15 minutes just dialoguing on this, but you hear him say, if there are people in this congregation from the South, they're not going to like what I have to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. He says it, and he says it without any mistake. Before even Dr. King went to Morehouse College, he's saying, the Jews ignoring the problem, the unfairness that America wreaks upon the African American is a disgrace to the Jewish people. And at the end, what is he saying? When he says, what if the Catholics fail? What if the Protestant fails? Must we fail because they do? This, I believe, I can't say for sure, but I speculate that this is his response to what he has heard said many a time, which is, Rabbi, don't come to us and ask us to do all this stuff for other people. They hate us. They hate us. So let the Protestants, let the majority go and do what's right. We didn't bring this upon these people. We're the sufferers, and he won't hear of that. That beautiful line. I feel a double obligation because I am an American and I'm a Jew, and he won't hear of that. In other words, Judaism calls upon us and our Americanism to do what's right. Very powerful. Now, in 1954, you know, we have what is called a watershed event in the American experience, and segregation is no longer going to be legal, and that will cause a whole shift in America and in the American Jewish community. That shift is influenced by many things, and I'm going to just name three. First, the Jews are highly activated and concerned about the renewal of civil rights in interest because, first, Jews are more integrated into America than they had ever been. The war is over. Jews in large numbers had fought in World War II, and now we're moving into the suburbs, moving and integrating into America in ways that had never happened. That's number one. Number two, Jews in the 50s and 60s were slowly beginning to understand more and more about the Holocaust and what had happened there, and the whole lessons of racism and how it was directed towards us. And that also has its effect to activate a large interest in civil rights. And third is that there arose in this period of time a large movement politically within the Jewish community of what Dr. Marcus referred to as latitudinarianism, which is a $25 word for liberal politics. And all these three things together, I'm not saying that's exhaustive, but they encourage many people. It's been demonstrated again and again that of white people, Jews represented a larger proportion of white people than one would have expected for our numbers in the population. Now, right away, our involvement provokes backlash. And it's very similar, friends, to the backlash that we're hearing to this day. Because when this whole idea that we're hearing in the news today from certain corners that Mr. Soros or the Rothschilds are sponsoring these liberal ideas and are behind the whole Black Lives Matter movement, is nothing more than the same ideas, bigoted ideas that have appeared again and again in terms of Jews and blacks. That is, I'm going to say it the way the bigot would put it, that the black man would and woman would not have the wealth, the brains, the ability to organize in that way. And the only possible reason that they are doing so is because the Jews, who are in control of all of that, are motivating them to do all of these things. And that's therefore every single time there is activity on behalf of the black man or woman in America, the Jew is then blamed, whether the Jew's involved or not, because the bigot in America will say that the Jew has deliberately instigated the unrest. And you'll see this right now. You're looking on the screen. In 1957 and 58, many churches were bombed in America. But look at the number, and this is only a partial list, a number of the synagogues that were bombed. And I'm going to take you right now to just one. You notice number 4 is Nashville, Tennessee, 1958, March. Take a look at this picture. This was the JCC. A bomb was planted by the KKK. And the reason that the Jews in Nashville were attacked is because a graduate of the Hebrew Union College who led the congregation there, a man by the name of William Silverman, Rabbi Silverman, he spoke out in defense of integration. And therefore, the JCC was bombed, as you see. And I'm going to now play a rare recording of Rabbi Silverman. He's now deceased. And I want you to listen, because Rabbi Silverman, the following Friday, he wanted to just go on and have services in the congregation. It was the JCC that was bombed. And many people said we should not have services. We should close the temple. And the rabbi says, we're not going to close the temple. We're not going to hide. We're going to continue on. And if you don't want to go, don't go. And 10 years later, he was interviewed by a rabbinic student, and listen to how he puts it.
And of course, I'll never forget the first Friday night after the dynamiting of the Jewish Community Center. They had threatened to dynamite the temple that night. And I was urged by some members of the Board of Trustees to call off services. And I said the services will not be called off. Anybody who's frightened need not attend services. There will be adequate police protection. Now remember that as you came to services, you had to be identified by police. And you had to show some identification. But we had a packed temple. It was like Rosh Hashanah. And I don't remember the exact title of my sermon. I think it's on record, and perhaps it's in the archives there, but it was that we will not yield. Here was the point that they say, Rabbi, stick to the Bible. Well, this is the Bible. This is what the Bible teaches. Rabbi, stick to the Talmud. This is what the Talmud teaches. Rabbi, stick to Judaism. This is Judaism. And many times I carried a gun. I thought to myself, well, hey, what am I doing? You're carrying a gun. I'm not a gunsel. I'm a rabbi. My job is to teach Judaism. And I said, damn it, this is Judaism. To defend principles. And to fight for principle, and not just talk about justice, but to actually work for it.
And you see how even we're going back to 58, it's the same story. People in the congregation would say to the rabbi, look, Rabbi, don't talk about what's going on outside. Just stick to the Bible, stick to the Talmud. That's your business. And here he's pushing back. He's saying, this is what the Bible is compelling me to do. I have to speak about this. This is what Judaism teaches. And of course, he had to carry a gun because his life was threatened. So,
Rabbi Zola, maybe you can integrate as you're commenting on this as you're going forward. I know what you're going to get to, but the varied Jewish responses and the reasons for different responses in civil rights movement, Rosenwald's apolitical philanthropy, or the range of reactions in the Southern rabbinate, because not everybody is a Rabbi Silverman.
Yes, that's true, and we're going to get to that in right now. I'll jump to it. I'm just showing you this picture because what I wanted to do, I stuck this in because some of you who were on services last night heard Rabbi Serkman actually quote from Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King frequently giving the address where he said, "I want you to be maladjusted." Well, that was delivered in a synagogue. And I have that recording, Rabbi Serkman, but because of our time, I'm going to just go to 1963 to get to the point that you're making. In 1963 was a very, very difficult year in terms of civil rights in America. There was a great deal of turmoil. The year launches this way.
Today, I have stood where once Jefferson Davis stood and took an oath to my people. It is very appropriate that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the great Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum for freedom, as have our generation of forebears before us done time and again down through history. Let us rise to the call of freedom-loving blood that is in us, and send our answer to the tyranny that clanks its chains upon the South. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth, I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny, and I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
So that's George Wallace, governor of Alabama, and you're looking at the rabbi who was the rabbi of Birmingham, Alabama at the time, Rabbi Milton or Mickey Grafman. And Rabbi Grafman is not what you would call fighting for civil rights in the same way that some were, but Rabbi Grafman was committed to trying gradually to bring integration to his city of Birmingham. And so right after that speech, that inaugural address that Governor Wallace, George Wallace, delivered, he puts his name, as you can see, to the first statement ever issued by white ministers in the state of Alabama, the white minister's law and order statement issued a few days after that speech was delivered. I can't read the whole statement, but you'll trust me, it's a very mild statement which just urges people to keep calm and to follow the law. The United States Supreme Court has made a decision, and it's our duty to follow the law. Nothing more is said, and 12 clergy people sign their names. 2 of the 12 are rabbis, the rabbi of Birmingham, Alabama, and the rabbi of Montgomery. Because of what I'm going to play for you next, Rabbi Blackschlager from Montgomery never again will sign his name in public to any such statement. And Rabbi Grafman becomes embattled. And just for putting his name on this, this is the Rabbi Grafman, who is speaking the following Friday night. So this was, I think it was the 14th that Wallace spoke. The statement comes out on the 16th, the next day or the day after. This is at the congregation. He recorded this, and listen carefully. It goes by quickly. You'll hear what he says to his congregation on the 18th.
You either believe in the Father when it's God or you don't. You either believe in the brother with the man or you don't. You either believe in the 10 Commandments or you don't. You either believe in love or you don't. You either believe in justice or you don't. But if you don't hypocritically say you believe it, and go to church or synagogue and pray about it. And then, if your minister dares to sign his name to a statement such as appeared in the papers yesterday, or raises his voice against the injustices of any people, see to it that he gets his walking papers.
So I think you can see that within a few days' time, Rabbi Grafman, just for signing his name to that statement, and he had been in that congregation for quite some time already, they called for his dismissal. Now, he was not dismissed, but this gets to the point that Rabbi Serkman, I believe, was making, and that is that not everybody was behind, not everyone was on the same side. And Rabbi Grafman gets himself into even more trouble the following April, just a few months later, which is when Dr. King decides he wants the March for Civil Rights in Birmingham in April, and 8 clergy, including Rabbi Grafman, as I'm going to show you, they issue a statement. These 8 clergy, I'll blow up their names. They say to Dr. King, please don't come to Birmingham in April. There's too much turmoil. And if you march and organize for civil rights, it's going to cause more harm than good. Dr. King comes and he's thrown in jail. And in jail, he writes this famous letter. And the letter is addressed to these 8 clergymen. And there is Rabbi Grafman. The students all over this country read this letter, and probably the teacher doesn't say a word about the 8 clergymen, but it probably goes without saying that the students assume that the clergymen were not in favor of Dr. King. However, I just played for you this recording that you heard, and now I want to go to September of 63. We're still in 63. This is, by the way, the famous sentence that Dr. King writes, that one of the most famous sentences in that letter, where he says, "Justice too long delayed is justice denied," because the clergy say, we're on your side, but you got to be patient. You're pushing too hard. And this is Dr. King's response. Well, you know that, as you can see, in September on the 16th, 1963, a bomb blows up on the 16th Street Baptist Church, and 4 little children in Sunday school are killed. And it becomes a national a tragedy. And this is literally days before Rosh Hashanah. Now, we have Rabbi Grafman's Rosh Hashanah address. And I want you, as you hear this very quick clip from this address, I want you to bear in mind that I know this is different in Larchmont. I know in Larchmont, you have huge crowds coming on Shabbat, every single Shabbat, not just on the high holy days, but in many places, you only have large crowds on the high holy days. And this is the case, of course, in Birmingham on Rosh Hashanah, in front of thousands of people who he probably does not see on every Shabbat. These are the words he announces. This is only days after this tragedy had occurred in Birmingham.
Where were you yesterday afternoon at 3:30? I'll tell you where I was. I was the 6th Avenue Baptist Church, Negro. I was at that funeral. I'm no hero. Anybody knows me, I'm no hero, I'm no martyr. I don't want to get killed. I don't want to have this temple bombed, and I don't want my home bombed. 4 children had been brutally killed. All we wanted to do was to go there and express our grief and our sorrow, to show these Negro families that we felt the depth of their sorrow, we shared it. All we wanted to do was to say to the Negro community, you're not alone. There are white people. This was all.
So this is a way of my showing you that not everybody was able to be on the forefront of this. Grafman is in the South, and he's in Birmingham, and he has lots of people who do not support him. And yet he goes in front of his congregation on Rosh Hashanah and tells them. He didn't need to tell them, but he tells them where he was. He says, I was at that funeral, and this is why. In other words, even though he isn't like Abraham Joshua Heschel, and even though he's struggling against the opposition of many Jews in his community, he's still trying to push people forward. I have to bring this to a close, and the last thing I want to show you is probably the most moving thing I'm going to show you, and that's, of course, the speech of Rabbi Joachim Prinz, which was delivered at the March on Washington, also in 1963, this very active year about which we've been speaking. Dr. Prinz, his picture is now in front of you. Dr. Prinz was born in Germany, trained in Germany, ordained in Germany, and is exiled from Germany in 1937 as a result of the Nazis. And when he comes to America, he becomes a protege of Stephen Wise. He will become the president of the American Jewish Congress, and he takes that Congress into civil rights activities. And the American Jewish Congress and Rabbi Prinz as its president, he was a rabbi in Newark, New Jersey. Rabbi Prinz leads the Congress to be a co-sponsor of the March on Washington. And as a co-sponsor, he therefore has an opportunity to offer a speech. And this famous speech, which has been eclipsed because of Dr. King's iconic address that was given that day, this little 2.5-minute speech by Rabbi Prinz is often ignored. But I'm going to play it for you, and we'll end with this, because Rabbi Prinz's speech underscores what I told you a minute ago about the importance of the dawning recognition of what happened in the Holocaust and how it relates to the freedom of and the rights of American Blacks and all people who are being denied equal opportunity. Dr. Prinz went to Washington. Here's another picture from that moment. You can see he's standing next to the late Congressman John Lewis, right at the foot of Abraham Lincoln. Everything is tied together here. You see Dr. King in the front row, Walter Reuther of the AFL-CIO on the far right, standing up, and many other prominent leaders of the civil rights movement. They also went to see the president that day. There's Rabbi Prinz. Behind him is Dr. King and the late Congressman John Lewis. So now let's listen to his message, and we'll conclude with that.
I speak to you as an American Jew. Our fathers taught us thousands of years ago that when God created man, he created him as everybody's neighbor. Neighbor is not a geographic term. It is a moral concept. It means our collective responsibility for the preservation of man's dignity and integrity. Our Jewish historic experience of 3,500 years began with slavery and the yearning for freedom. I was the rabbi of the Jewish community in Berlin under the Hitler regime. I learned many things. The most important thing that I learned in my life is that bigotry and hatred are not the most urgent problems. The most urgent, the most disgraceful, the most shameful, and the most tragic problem is silence. A great people which had created a great civilization had become a nation of silent onlookers. They remained silent in the face of hate, in the face of brutality, and in the face of mass murder. America must not become a nation of onlookers. America must not remain silent, not merely Black America, but all of America. It must speak up and act from the president down to the humblest of us, and not for the sake of the Negro, not for the sake of the black community, but for the sake of the image, the dream, the idea, and the aspiration of America itself. Our children, yours and mine, in every school across the land, every morning pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, and then they, the children, speak fervently and innocently of this land as a land of liberty and justice for all. The time, I believe, has come to work together, for it is not enough to hope together, and it is not enough to pray together. To work together, that this children's oath pronounced every morning from Maine to California, from north to south, that this oath will become a glorious, unshakable reality in a morally renewed and united America. Thank you.
So I'm going to conclude in this way, and there's much more, of course, that could be said, but I think I've already exhausted an hour and 15 minutes, and I just do want to say that those last words are very important. What I've tried to at least present this afternoon is that from the very beginning of the nation, American Jews have taken an active commitment, an active involvement in enlarging civil rights in this nation. That enlargement began with interest in our own equality, but grew very rapidly to be concerned with the civil rights of others. And that throughout the history of the nation, American Jews have never stopped pushing the nation to live up to the lofty, idealistic vision of the founding people who envisioned the nation and put such beautiful words in its forming documents. And that's been our unique role. And now we are faced today with, again, a difficult period, a very difficult period. And all we can do is say, this is what our predecessors have done. This is where they brought us. They were convinced that they had to fight to make the best out of this nation. And it'll be up to us and those of us living today, because as you can see, 100 years from now, somebody, maybe not with red hair, but somebody else will be standing and teaching and using the American Jewish Archives to assess what we did today, whether or not we're going to make history or not. That's going to be up to us. But our heritage is, as you saw from the Rabbi Prinz, our heritage is that we have not, by and large, we have refused to be silent onlookers. We've refused to stay silent, and that's where we're at today. I want to thank you so much for such a warm and a gracious reception. I apologize if I stayed a little longer.
Rabbi Zola, this is a course. You could give a whole course in just this moment, and you have such rich. No, we had people with questions, but again, and I would say this to everybody. If you want to, you can email me and I'll forward the questions or to Rabbi Zola. And maybe tomorrow, towards the end of his talk tomorrow morning, he can address some of the questions. Are we not categorized as a race and not a religion? Was the Jew accepted? And yet, it's just the, and I hate that you had to cut out the king, the speech and but it was just to hear Dr. Wise, Stephen S. Wise. I mean, it's just just a gift. And also, it sounds like he comes from Great Britain or something. I don't know how you get an accent like that. Thank God I have no accent. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rabbi Serkman, and to all of you who stuck it out for the whole time. I'm really very flattered, and look forward to being there tomorrow morning.
We have one last thing to do, Rabbi Zola.
Yes, I've drawn out to the end of the Sabbath. I can see.
You know what? And nobody would believe it, but the Abba Hillel Silva rule is an hour and 45 minutes, right? In front of you.
Well, I'm in the state of Ohio, so you'll have to forgive me.
And I think Rabbi Frankel's coming on. Everybody should come back tomorrow at 10 o'clock for an amazing presentation. Rabbi Zola has more magic yet to come. Rabbi Frankel, are you joining me?
I am. I'm here. I don't know if Jane can highlight both of us.
I hope so.
But hopefully we can be side by side, because it's hard to hold a guitar and a flaming object at the same time.
Perfect. I got it for you.
So friends, if you have your own candles nearby or something sweet to smell when we get to that part, a glass to raise, please do join us. Over the spices. Over the candle. Ore haish. Ore haish. Shavua tov, 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 Shavua tov. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase.
Shavua Tov. Thanks, Rabbi Frankel, the inimitable Rabbi Zola. We had my friend and our friend, Bishop Wayne Powell from the Straight Gate Church, who comes to Chaver Torah every Shabbat morning along with Shana, his daughter. We had people from across the generations. So it's just a gift to be able to listen and learn from you. And there's always more. You always give us more to think about. And so come tomorrow, join us for the final leg, some treasure trove, real treasures of the 20th century from the American Jewish Archives, bringing Jewish history to life. Folks, a Shavua Tov, a sweet week to health and wholeness and hope. We have work to do. Civil rights is sacred rights. There's a lot we have left to do. And so join us in the work. Thank you, Rabbi Zola.
Thank you, Rabbi Zola. Thank you.